My name is Jane Debevoise, and I'm the chair of Asia Art Archive, a nonprofit library, archive, and research platform focused on recent art from Asia. For those of you who are not familiar with AAA, our mothership, as we like to call it, is located in Hong Kong, but we have offices in New York and India, and I'm speaking tonight from New York, where I have been since the pandemic kept us all at home. Tonight's program, Props, Performing, Performance, Tracing Early Performance Art in 1990s Malaysia, will begin with a talk by Professor Sarena Abdullah. In this talk, Professor Abdullah, who is joining us from Malaysia today, where it is now 8 a.m. in the morning, will examine interdisciplinary explorations between two main artistic fields, fine arts and performing arts. To illustrate her research, Professor Abdullah will focus on several, quote, visual performances in collaboration with Five Arts Center that took place between 1991 and 1995. Following her lecture, Professor Nora Taylor of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago will join Professor Abdullah in a short discussion, and then we will open up the forum, the platform, to the audience for a Q&A. Now, a few housekeeping notes. We really, really encourage you to ask questions. So please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I think you can all find it down here. And do that at any point during the lecture or during the program. The speakers will try to answer as many as possible, but our time is limited, and so we may not get to all of them. This event is being recorded, and if you miss part of it or want to watch it again, the video will be posted on our website, the Asia Art Archive in America website, within a few days. We're also live streaming this event from Facebook. So if you're watching through that platform, please feel free to send your comments or comment with any questions that you might have. And our colleagues who are behind the scenes, as you know, it's not just me, it's a team of people behind the scenes who will send those questions off to the speakers during the Q&A. Our program tonight is only 1 hour, and Professor Abdullah's talk will take about 40 minutes and will be followed by a 15 to 20-minute discussion and Q&A. So again, we apologize in advance if we don't have enough time to get to all of your questions. But if you leave your name or if you send it the questions in email format that has your name rather than anonymously, we will send your questions on to the speakers or to whoever you address them to. Now, a brief bio. The larger bios are available online. The larger bios are available on the program announcement. So we're going to reduce them, synthesize them to say the following. Professor Sarena Abdullah is currently Deputy Dean, Research, Innovation, and Community Industry Engagement at the School of the Arts, University Sains, Malaysia. In 2017, and I'm picking only the most recent events or recent relevant events, she received the Asia Research Award from the Paul Mellon Center for Studies in British Art, in conjunction with Asia Art Archive. It's a Asia in London program, and has lectured widely and also published. Her most recent and must-read book is Malaysian Art Since the 1990s, Postmodern Situation, which was published in 2018, as was Ambitious Alignments, New Histories of Southeast Asian Art, 1945 to 1990, of which she was co-editor. Professor Nora Taylor has been teaching for over 13 years at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where she specializes in South and Southeast Asian art. She has also written and lectured widely. Two of her many noteworthy publications are Painters in Hanoi, an ethnography of Vietnamese art, and another publication, Modern and Contemporary Southeast Asian Art, an anthology, of which he was co-editor. In addition to writing and teaching, Nora has also, or Professor Taylor has also curated, including a 10-venue touring exhibition entitled Changing Identity, Recent Work by Women Artists from Vietnam. And this toured between 2007 and 2009. So thank you all of you, the audience, for coming tonight. And thank you, the speakers, for joining us as well. And now I will turn the mic over to Professor Abdullah.
Hello, everybody. Good evening or good morning in Malaysia. Good evening, of course, in New York, in America. Okay, let me share my screen with you first before we go on. So the title of my paper today is Props Performance, Tracing Early Performance Art in 1990s Malaysia. So, okay, all right. So basically the ideation of this research is actually based on an area that my, doctorate dissertation did not cover, which Jane just now mentioned that it was published in the recent publication in 2018, Malaysian Art Since the 1990s, Postmodern Situation. In that particular research, I have mainly focused on the development of paintings, installation works, and mentioned several new media works, but I have not examined performance art in particular. The current performance art practice in Malaysia have expanded and evolved from performances by Intan Rafiza, Aisyah Baharudin, to participatory performances such as works by Sharon Chin and also Azizan Rahman Paiman. This is Azizan Rahman Paiman's, Putar Alam Cafe in Singapore Biennale 2016, and Sharon Chin's recent Tugu Kita in 2018. So this paper, however, will discuss quote-unquote visual performances, visual as in visual arts, performance as in the term that we use to discuss works of, visual, but by using the body and all that. So performance art in the context of fine arts practice and also performing arts through collaborative performances between fine arts practitioners and those from performing arts background. It was one of the early forms of interdisciplinary collaborations, whether intentionally or otherwise. Nevertheless, if you were to trace the history of performance or performance art in Malaysia, several early multidisciplinary practitioners in groups such as okay, this is Sharon Chin's. Okay. So it was one of the early forms of interdisciplinary collaborations in groups such as Anak Alam, okay, with members such as Osman Awang, Ismail Zain, Rahimir Harun, Latif Mohidin, etc., were the early performing arts collaborations that have been highlighted and have been mentioned in Malaysian art history, although an extensive research on these early collaborations and their impact is still an under-researched area. So we can see through the images here some of the early collaborations, but this is, until right now, nobody has sort of like really gone through these archival materials which is mostly within the hands of the artists and sort of like, do a better research on this area, yeah. But nevertheless, okay, I'm not going to go into that. This talk will only focus on a few art activities during the early 1990s in Malaysia. So the 1990s was a period in which shifts from a modernistic to a more postmodernist approach in the Malaysian art scene could be observed. The decade marks an increasing challenge in Malaysia's history, race, and national belongings as a result of a newer geopolitics in the world and also Malaysia's socio-political transformations. In the visual arts, the 1990s indicated a shift and an expansion of exploration of new materials and also experimentations of new languages of art, as well as highlighting a fresh outlooks on history and also cultural identity in terms of themes and also subject matter. Along with this development, the traditional medium of fine arts, which is painting, sculpture, and print, became somewhat restrictive, and artists began to explore and experiment in the works that they produced. In the context of these changes, or the phase of experimentation and so exploration, I will be discussing these few early collaborations, such as, these 4 art exhibitions or events, okay? First, 2 installations, second, altar art, third, Warbox, Lalang killing tools, and also 4th, Skin Trilogy. So these are dated 1991, 2 installations and altar art in 1991, Warbox Lalang killing tools 1994, and also Skin Trilogy 1995. Okay, to start off, I would like to open this presentation by referring to a map. Okay, as you can see here, quote unquote, a map presented in the catalog or booklet of Warbox Lalang killing tools. And it says here in the caption, which you couldn't see here, data for time as compiled by Christian Jit, time map composed by a group of people on 18 September 1994 from 8 p.m. to midnight. So this quote-unquote time map listed a series of events in very random manner before and after birth of the 3 artists who participated in this particular exhibitions, okay, which is Bayu Utomo, Wong Ho Cheong, and also Raja Shariman. So basically this quote-unquote time map contextualized the 3 artists within the larger social, political, and event and even the world context. The statement of the way that it was written itself reminded us, or me at least, 2 ways artworks were captioned into words a mystical reality, an exhibition by late Reza Piadasa and also Sulaiman Issa. If you all remember this, particular pertinent exhibition in 1974. Basically, towards a mystical reality was based on the idea of existence of objects in real time and space. In mystical reality, the idea of everyday objects taken from their original settings and appropriated as art objects based on the concept of ephemerality based on Zen or Taoism ideology. It was an attempt to ask Malaysian artists to examine local space and realities that both of these artists, as in Pedas and also Sulaiman, is viewed as equally important in the context of arts, or that is Western art. Similarly, with text that describes this time map, if you can see here, data for time as compiled, sorry, typo there, as compiled by Christian Jit, time map composed by a group of people on 18 September 1994 from 8 p.m. to midnight. So this time map, or at least the context of the, the caption of the time map insinuated an ala of an extension of mystical reality. So why do I say this to begin with? So if you were to look at the mystical reality exhibition, the items or objects that has been exhibited are also captioned as such. Like, for example, the empty cage after release of a bird at 2:46 p.m. on Monday. Number 2, potted plant watered and looked after by the 2 artists over a period of 7 months. So this kind of like a caption in which insinuating time and space. So when I was reading the Warbox Lalang Killing Tools and the caption written by Christian Jit, then it's sort of like, you know, triggered to me that there's somewhat a similarity in which how this is being positioned, and also the way that both Reza Piadasa and Sulaiman Issa position the objects in which they exhibited in mystical reality. Okay, so before I go on further, it is important to elucidate or to give a little bit deeper background of Five Arts Center, in which these 4 exhibitions of 4 art events were actually, you know, organized by. So Five Arts Center, if you go to their website, okay, Five Arts Center was founded in 1984 by theater directors Chin San Sui, Christian Jit, and also dance choreographer Marin De Cruz, alongside the late Reza Piadasa and also K.S. Maniam. These founders mark a dynamic collaboration between Malaysian artists and producers who are highly dedicated to generate alternative art forms and images in the contemporary art scenes, namely dance. So the 5 arts was actually dance, drama, the visual arts, and creative writing, with the 5th component open to any form of art. Okay. So the late Reza Piadasa, for example, was a well-known figure in the art scene who has actively involved in various discourse and discussions of various issues pertaining to visual arts. Okay, so the late Reza Piadasa himself was an artist and also an art historian, but in the initiation or in the establishment of Five Arts Center, he is also one of the founding members. So so this can be argued, like having those links, you know, I would like to make that kind of observation that allows interdisciplinary dialogues and possibilities to happen between visual arts and also performing arts, although Reza Piadasa himself has never been involved directly in the events that will be discussed in this paper. So he must have some sort of like injected idea to discussion in the setting up of Five Arts Center. So it would not be far-fetched to posit the fact that the connection and personal friendship between the late Reza Piadasa, who has been actively involved in various discourse and discussions of Malaysian art, and Christian Jit, the late Christian Jit himself, have allowed these alternative art forms and ideas between fine arts and performing arts to be explored. Although Reza Piadasa himself did not participate in any of these exhibitions or art events, he was known to have espoused the idea of the alternative aesthetics in his works, as mentioned earlier. And as both Reza Piadasa and Christian Jit had also presented their papers during the 1971 National Cultural Congress, even in Towards a Mystical Reality, Christian Jit himself had written the introduction for the quote-unquote manifesto or the text that comes with Towards a Mystical Reality. So why I'm drawing these connections is that to sort of elucidate or my personal observation in how these 2 important characters, both in performing arts and also fine arts, have personal friendships, discussions. I highly believe that they have shared many discussions on philosophical discourse, etc. So they had, at many points, collaborated or worked together. Okay. So based on this personal friendship and alliances in terms of cultural identity and discussion before the NCP or the National Cultural Policy, it can be firmly argued that both of these art practitioners are on a similar page. Christian Jit himself, through his return to English language theatre and the promotion of interdisciplinary experimentations and explorations through Five Arts Center, can be seen as a locus for those who do not fit the espoused national narrative of art. Christian Jit's own involvement with the visual also happened at various occasions. As I mentioned, he had written the introduction of towards the mystical reality when he was the Deputy Dean of Faculty of Arts at University of Malaya, and he was also appointed as the judge panelist for Ceylon, Malaysia, and he had also contributed essays in a very important exhibition entitled Vision and Idea, in which Reza Piadasa is also one of the contributors as well. So back to the 1990s. Oh, sorry, going ahead of my time. Okay. All right. Besides the early conversations on the visual arts by the founders of Five Arts Center, the first artistic role of visual artists on performing stage could be seen through the role of Ismail Zain, who took part in Five Arts Center's Swan Song in 1988. Swan Song was based on a poem entitled Nyanyian Angsa by Indonesian poet W.S. Rendra that was written in the 1970s. Through this performance, which I do not have an image here, Ismail Zain was invited to paint during the performance at the corner of the stage. It must be noted, however, in the same year, the Theatre Chindai by Nordin Hassan, Ismail Zain was also involved in the set and also the design poster, the poster to promote the Malay play. So late 1980s, in such works, okay, and also early 1990s, there were already visual artists that were involved, especially in the making of props, yeah, in theater productions. So in regards to the late Ismail Zain's quote-unquote performance, because he's supposed to be on the stage, he was on the stage painting while they are performing Swan Song. Marian de Cruz recalls, open quote, "And I thought in dance and theater and live performance, there is no one final product. Each time you see the creation of the final product, it happens each time you see the creation of the final product." So she says that in dance and theater and live performance, there is no, so it is an ongoing final product, but in the arts, there's only an outcome or that particular final product, okay? So when having Ismail Zain on the stage, she further elucidates, it happens right there with the audience, the fact that Ismail Zain was painting on the stage. But in painting, you do not see the process. Dance, once it's done, you see a final product that's fixed. What if we allow the audience into the process, put an artist on stage to paint for 30 minutes? I asked, and Ismail Zain said yes, he would paint. So that was like the kind of, how Marian explains about the initial idea to put Ismail Zain, on stage painting. So in a way, I see it that more of a propish kind of nuance, but having said that, like there were already a few visual artists who are already involved with the backstage, theatrical production and things like that, as I mentioned, as you can see in the image in front here. So in this early context, Ismail Zain's role was perhaps more of a prop, but through such propish appearance, Marian was very conscious with the aspect of process in the visual arts. As a result, Marian foregrounded the process of art making on stage, where Ismail Zain was neither performing nor doing a performance, but his inclusion could be seen as mere prop to the whole setup. Yet it is true that making stage props for theater is not new. Among visual artists, many visual artists have worked with theater productions as part of the production crews in other theater production, not only Five Arts Center, but like Center Stage as well. The performance or the participation of Ismail Zain has never been discussed in the context of fine arts, yet a series of artworks, exhibitions, and art events that are organized and supported by Five Arts Center and various visual artists later extends and explores this collaborative premise. Okay. So what will be discussed next falls at both ends, performing and performance, and I will use these terms interchangeably. This is because the nature of performance that was presented in regards to the artworks in discussion was actually done by performing artists. Thus, this inevitably includes some choreography and also planned dance movement. Unlike performance art by other visual artists, such as Intan Rafiza, Asha Baharudin, Azizan Rahman Parimat, and Sharon Chin that I showed earlier. With that said, this paper by no means elevate one art making against the other or over the other, but will discuss these works as of equal footing. So these are, there would be like four exhibition or art events that I'll mention here. I do not have the cover for 2 installations. In fact, 2 installations are the one that I don't really have much except for these images taken from either the Star or NST. Okay, so in 2 installations, the installation art approach received receptive response in the 1990s. Okay, but it was these few installation performances that interdisciplinary explorations between different artistic fields happened, connecting performance and visual arts practice. For example, on the left, Raja Shahriman in the exhibition 2 installations installed in the gallery space, sharpened bamboo spikes and broken glasses. As sculpture making in Malaysia has always been quite conservative and limited in terms of its production, we could see this as a very experimental approach that expands the language of sculpture as a site-specific installation. But most importantly, the installation also becomes a part of a performance piece with dancer Marion de Cruz perform or dance with the work as she threads her way along the sharpened edges of the installation, reflecting and revealing, open quote, how society behaves. Everyone is constantly nudging their way through danger in search of something that is more attractive, close quote. This particular installation performance event is an example of how space and performance were explored and experimented. If the essence of the installation art is a spectator's participation, the inclusion of the crew's performance brings the experimentation exploration of space to a higher level. The performance by the crews offers the viewer a different understanding and engagement with the installation work. Although the audience are not required to walk through the installation or site-specific installation, the crew's performance requires her to engage with the installation by dancing through the installation cautiously, by simply confronting and trading the bamboo and class structures. The performance itself requires the audience to witness and enhance and also consolidate the meaning of the work in such a short period of time. In the same exhibition or in the same program, okay, Liu Qingyu, you can see the image on the right, presented Who Am I? An installation that includes video, Chinese altar boards that also incorporate the element of performance as part of the work. In Who Am I? And the subsequent Chinese prayer altars, okay, so here, Chinese prayer altars, which was presented at the altar art. Liu Qingyu presented discarded altars that were picked from roadsides and also various monitors placed and installed within the site of the exhibition. The altars were also smashed during the performance with loud cries in Hokkien, giving the space an eerie and disturbing echo. So these 2 pieces basically were included in altar art, okay, another event in Singapore. As you can see here, the images with the spiky thorns and all that is Raju Sharman's bamboo and glass. And you can see Marion de Cruz perform within or interacted with the installation through the performance itself. Yeah, and also Qingyu's Who Am I? And in this version is Chinese prayer altars, which is also performed in Altar Art 1991. Okay. If Liu Kongyu's work is transitory and the remnants of the installations and what was left behind were the whole artwork, then Suk Ching by Wong Hoi Cheong is slightly more complex. It's a slightly more complex artwork. In this section, I will discuss and extend how the performing and the visual artists produce arts that are hard to define and contextualized as they explore and experiment without any hesitation. I am in the view that Suk Ching was one of this form of complex experimentation. Suk Ching, what it means, literally means is actually purify elimination, was a video art that reiterated and emphasized the experience of Malaysians during Japanese occupations that were buried in the collective memory of post-independence Malaya. Directed like a pseudo-documentary, the video work was actually based on several of the artist's paintings and drawings that were produced by the artist since 1982. So Go Benglan explains, open quote, the completion of the painting, however, left him, Hoi Cheong, dissatisfied as he felt that the medium was too limited to represent the rich dimension of experiences that he had gathered, close quote. Wong Hoi Cheong ascends and explores the series further by going back to his respondents and record the interview with all people who have stories to tell in regards to the Japanese occupation. When he actually, in fact, he did the paintings first, then only later he did the video works, okay? So the video a la documentary, video documentary with montage of the stories that are told by Malaysians who have lived and survived the horror. What is interesting is that the video will also include snippets of choreographed performance with stage movements by Marian de Cruz and also several other dancers. As such, Marian's performance or the Cruz performance become part of the video art. But what is interesting is that what has started as video art has also been presented in a workshop performance at KL International Video Art Festival in the same year. So another snippet here. So the images here and you know, the paintings behind, and also there's a choreographed movement in front as part of this workshop performance. Okay. So so during the performance workshop version of the early works such as paintings by Hoi Cheong, TV monitors that did the video works were positioned in the space as well. To complete this, a series of movements were done alongside both paintings and a video, resulting in a performance that incorporated visual works. As such, Suk Ching can be seen as an interesting exploration and experimentation of quote-unquote visual artists, as you know, the works converge the language of both visual arts and also performance or performing arts through the means of video and performance itself. De Cruz recalls, open quote, we made performance directly based on the painting and video, taking sounds, text, movements, poses, and emotions from the video and painting. For every rehearsal, we would unroll and put up the painting and play the video and improvise. I remember I used to say to the performers, when you don't know what to do, just copy a pose from the painting. And that's exactly what we did, end quote. Wong Hoi Cheong then expands his work in his Lalang series, or Lalang or Rhizome in English, an art exhibition and multi-part event. So this is a part of Warbox Lalang Killing Tools. To those who are familiar with Malaysia's socio-political turmoil, the term Lalang itself insinuated the Operasi Lalang, a major Barisan Nasional-led government crackdown in 1987 that led to the arrest without trial of more than 106 people, among them opposition politicians, NGO activists, intellectuals, and students under the Internal Security Act, or ISA. In the installation performance, the artist planted Lalang at the lawn of the National Art Gallery. Thus, it does not only work as an act of exhibition. Wong's Lalang was also, quote-unquote, performed through 3 stages. Spraying of weed killer on which he did on the 21st of October, cutting and burning of Lalang on 27th of October, and also returfing of lawn, 30th, which he did on the 30th of October. In this work, rather than performing artist produces a performance art, the act of extermination by a weed killer, a public burning and returfing of the Lalang of the Lalang or the lawn of the National Art Gallery, it became the performance. Okay, so it is a kind of a shift towards fine arts performance in that sense. Yeah. Okay, although Ray Lagenbach's reading of the works in the context of botanical garden, written in the catalogue, I see Lalang as Hoi Cheong's act of mourning of the country's democracy at that time. Lalang itself was presented on the 7th anniversary of Operation Lalang, a costly weedy Malaysian grass. Lalang was presented by the artist as a form of scientific documentation exhibition and installation performance, which was exhibited at the previous National Art Gallery in Jalan Sultan Hishamuddin. So he also, planted these long coarse grasses at other site-specific areas in front of the Malaysian railway station and also in front of the KTM office itself. Okay, that's another image of Lalang. So on the left is the exhibition. So inside of the National Art Gallery had this kind of like pseudo-scientific exhibition of what Lalang is. Okay, so then he goes, he basically planted the Lalang and also did this tree performance sort of to terminate this Lalang outside of the National Art Gallery. Okay, the final collaboration that will be examined and discussed here is Skin Trilogy 1995 that has been held at the National Art Gallery in Kuala Lumpur. So in this particular work, performing arts, basically Five Arts Center organizes performing arts within the white space, okay? The Skin Trilogy was a major production by Five Arts Center that was executed in the context of the White Cube within the gallery space of the National Art Gallery. Skin Trilogy comprised 3 series of performances entitled Skins, Not Our Own, Skin, and Our Own Skins that had been executed between March 19 and also between March 19 and April 1st, 1995, with a combined staging of all 3 parts on April 2nd. These dramas were interlinked dramas that took place amongst the exhibits of artworks by participating artists such as Bayu Utomo Rajikin, Wong Hoi Cheong. So if you can see here, this is basically the layout of the old National Art Gallery. Basically, you can see as you enter, this is the main entrance. Hasnul Jaman Saidam's work here, Nur Hanim Khairuddin's work here, Liu Kung Yu's work here, Hasnul again here, Simrin, Bayu Utomo, and also Zulkifli Yusuf. Okay, and Zulkifli Yusuf, Immunity 1 is in the middle of the space. So let's see. So these are like the list of artworks that has been exhibited. So basically, the artworks were exhibited as conventional art exhibition between February 21st until April 2nd. Okay, only the particular few days that the performing arts happened within the exhibition space. So during the Skin Trilogy drama, the White Box became the stage of what Christian Jit described as visual performance event on a futuristic Malaysia. The drama explores a situation of a futuristic vision of a Malaysian society through the story of a couple who lives in Unit 501. So, and goes on with the narrative of the story. Yeah. So, but it must be noted here that how Christian Jit envisions a project in which artists from different disciplines bring together their ideas and form their practice along experimental and explorative endeavor. For example, taking the theater out of the conventional stage and explore what happens when the art gallery becomes inhabited with moving, speaking, reverberating, and dancing bodies instead. During the performance, the audience can sit or move around, and there is no demarcation between the stage and the audience. For this collaboration, Bayu Utomo produces game X, an expanded version of the Snake and Ladders game, which is installed in the gallery space, while Liu Kungyu produces a work that he has heard as a child. But I think it is more interesting for me than like talking. Okay, that's the end. I'm going to show you, I'm going to like share with you the video, okay? The video, which will be more interesting for you all to visualize. Okay, let's see, all right. So you can see this, right? Okay. So basically, this is you can see. Okay. This is Hanim Khairuddin's talisman series. Okay. At the back, you can see the the text textile. Okay, hanging behind. Yeah. This is you can see the paintings or graffiti-like paintings behind. So that's Bayu Utomo's work. Okay. This is that was Lukumu. So this is the structure before. It was Zulkifli Yusuf Immunity 1. Okay, so in a sense, how the space at the National Art Gallery was sort of transformed into this performing space in which Christian Jit envisions there would be like interactions between performing artists and also the artwork itself. And so in fact, Hoi Chung, who was the curator of this particular exhibition, also mentioned the fact that you know, despite Christian Jit's envision the text or the script of this play or the story of the play, you know, that goes into the you know, he envisions a futuristic Malaysia, but Hoi Chong sees that how artists produce work that actually does not exactly deal with being future, but rather like the historical side of it. So I've read that somewhere mentioned by Hoi Chong. Okay, yeah. All right. So thank you.
Thank you.
Back to Jane. Back to Jane.
I think it's thank you so much, Sarena. That was really a wonderful overview of artistic practices and performances in Malaysia. And I'm really impressed by the archival material that you managed to collect, since we are on this Asia Art Archive platform. I'm really appreciated all of that, especially the footage, but also the photographs and the materials that you obtain. So I know that time is short, but I just want to make, I have a few questions, but also I want to make a few comments. One is, it's really fascinating how the 1990s in Southeast Asia are a moment for experimentation and kind of and for the practice of performance art. I'm thinking of, you know, in Sarena Natasha and Hanoi, and then of course in Singapore after the Artist Village. There were the kind of rise in performance art is really interesting. And I was interested in how you made also a distinction between performing arts and performance art, because in other countries in Southeast Asia, there's kind of a rejection of making a connection between performing arts and performance art. Because I know in Myanmar, let's say, there was even though some scholars have tried to seek continuity between traditional performing arts and avant-garde or expressionistic performance or experimental performance art, other artists have actually rejected those connections. And I think you mentioned something about how the 1990s in Malaysia really constituted a shift and an exploration of new materials. So perhaps that's one question. Are they also rejecting the connection between performing arts, or are you saying that they're kind of embracing that kind of connection? I also was really interested by Ismail Zain's painting on stage in comparison or in contrast to Wang Haichung's kind of performances based on painting. And so you making these connections between painting and performance art in two kind of very different ways. And I thought that that was really interesting, if that signals a kind of interest in continuing painting practices, or is it a way of anchoring performance art more in the visual arts by having this connection with painting? Now, it's a sort of a question I have, that why these artists continue to have that relationship with painting. And it's also elsewhere in Southeast Asia, if I can compare with the experimental practices in Sarena Natasha and Hanoi, for instance, where there were sort of improvisation of performances, or sort of live painting performances with music, and then artists would paint while the music is being played. And so they were also kind of keeping up this connection between painting and performance. And then lastly, I guess I was thinking also about politics. You know, you talk about Lalang, and whereas some of the artists seem to be content to create art for art's sake and not really think about the connection to politics, but then when you have Wang Haichung is much more clearly making political statements. So I was wondering about that. So those are my observations, not really questions, but if you want to pick up any of the points that I make and expand on that, that would be great. And otherwise, I know that there are questions in the Q&A, so I want to be sure we get to those as well.
We can get to the questions at the Q&A. Yeah, and also probably I could link it with your observations with now.
Okay, yeah. So we have a question from Kong Kong, who says, thank you for the lecture. Malaysian American artist who expresses that they're grateful for your work. Can you describe what happened or what effects were had after these disruptive politicized artworks were exposed to the public? Did it influence the change in culture at all, and how were they received?
Okay, just say, I guess in a way that question would probably looks into Haichung's work, pointing back to your question or observation just now. It is quite an ironic and even maybe a triumph at the time of the fact that this was exhibited at the National Art Gallery. And there were no issues, not that I've heard of, but I think there's a little bit of brouhaha, but I'm not quite sure, but of the details of it, okay? But basically, these performances or the exhibitions were executed there, and in terms of how they were received, in Malaysia, in fact, the visual art scene is not a very big scene in that sense. I would personally, in terms of performing arts and also the visual arts, I think historically, performing arts has a larger or more deeper history through ritualistic practices. If one wants to sort of like connect performing arts in Malaysia in terms of its historization, but the visual arts actually has it comes with a modernistic nuance. So basically it is an importation of kind of art that comes in the late 19th and early 20th century in Malaysia. So even until today, you know, there is not a huge emphasis in terms of visual arts or the importance of visual arts in Malaysia. So in terms of receptions of Warbox Lalang killing tools, I guess amongst the artists and the smaller knit community at the time, there were no issues with that, okay? Because artists, I find Malaysian artists were very open with the fact, you know, art for art's sake and things like that, okay? So like in terms of so artists can get away with that kind of artistic license as long as nobody reports on it or complains or file a report in the police station, okay? So how does it change the culture at all? No, it does not change anything, unfortunately, no.
There are a couple of questions about the boundaries. Maybe you've already addressed this, but since you're talking about it, the boundaries between performance art and installation art, and then also this links to another question about performance artists collaborating with performing artists to create work. And so, you know, where's the distinction, I guess, between performance art and installation and, you know, visual art practices?
So in my observation, okay, it is only this period through these few events or you know, you can call it performing arts events, that this collaboration like really happened, in which there is not a very clear boundary between those two performing arts and also the performance and also performing and also the visual arts, okay? But after that, I could see a clear distinctive shift because only it sort of like ended in 1995, but of course there are also a few other you know, theaters produced by Five Arts Center, such as Ramadan Sita and all that, a few more others that involves visual artists as well. But then that is more of a like a set design, prop making and things like that, okay? But for me, these four events are quite distinctive in the sense, that the boundary is not that clear, okay? That is not that clear. So even during the 1990s, there are also performance work happens elsewhere, okay? In USM, but works by Ray Lagenbach, for example, were already being done in the early 1990s. And also later on, Aziza Rahman Paiman with his ice cream performance in Fukuoka at museum. Then we have performance by Sushi Sulaiman, okay? So those are quite you know, a really performance art, fine arts performance, okay? But in these four events, the performance sort of like coalesced in that sense. So it's not because the performance is being done by a performing artist, okay, by Mary de Cruz. And of course, being a choreographer, she cannot evade that aspect from coming in through her practice. Okay, so that will be like the clear distinction between performing performance in this four, and how that boundary does not happen, or this basically unclear boundary. Performance art and installation art. So artists produce the installation art, like Rajesh Ariman produced the installation art to heighten or to convey his message. He invited Mary de Cruz to perform with his installation art to give a deeper emphasis or to communicate further the idea behind his installation. Sort of like it's a double layer, in terms of his communicative act. Okay, if you leave the work as is, it should be as an installation art. Unless there's someone who comes in and perform with it, then it becomes like performance in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, and then there are a couple of questions about, is there such a thing as Malaysian performance art, and whether or not there was a self-conscious project to build a cultural identity through art, and whether or not this has changed. And then Peng Peng Wang also continues that idea of, is there a difference between Malaysian performance art and performance art works and artists elsewhere? I think it would be interesting to address this idea of cultural identity, especially, in light of the, you were talking about at various times when there was not only a shift in geopolitics, but also a response to certain government directives. So I don't know if you want to answer that.
So is there, back to the basic question, is there such thing as a Malaysian performance art? I think Malaysian performance artists or performance artists practicing in Malaysia basically does not dwell on that kind of question as much. Okay, of course, when you're talking about the national identity and stuff like that, that is because of the National Cultural Policy 1971, in which we could observe like Malaysian artists dealt with that for like almost 2 decades in terms of the identity issue. But why I'm saying that the fact that the 1990s marks, there's a different shift in the production of artwork since the 1990s, is that the fact that the younger artists does not relate to that kind of the ideation of what is a Malaysian identity, or at least through the context of the National Cultural Policy, which the emphasis will be the Malay Islam, or if the elements from other races can be included, as long as it doesn't go against Islam, for example. Okay, so so that's why in terms of painting during the 1980s, there is a huge emphasis in terms of exhibition of works that fits into this so-called National Cultural Policy and what it espoused. But during the early 1990s and late 1980s, you can see younger artists that does not sort of like find themselves related or in relation to this ideology anymore. And you'll find that a lot of artists produces figurative painting, for example. Okay, so that being said, the more popular artworks in Malaysia is like painting. Okay, you can sell it easily. It is easily to be exhibited and all that. Okay. But you can find during the 1990s, artists starts to explore that goes beyond painting, okay? Goes beyond painting into installation works. But works, some artists have explored installation works. But of course, even until today, that is not as popular in terms of commercialization and things like that, okay? So, so in terms of, the question, is there a Malaysian performance art identity? I would say yes and no. If there are any, it will be unconscious in a sense, because I'm recalling my conversations with Intan Rafiza, for example, in her narrative, or in her, you know, how she sees the history of performance art in Malaysia, that she ties it to the, you know, basically the ritualistic performing aspects, okay, of the Malay archipelago in general. And in some of her recent work, she did incorporate some of this, you know, ritualistic, or what, you know, the older rituals into her performance. So she might be doing it consciously, but I would say that she does it unconsciously because of her constant, you know, maybe engagement with ideas and things like that, but not as a certain consciousness through that she has to present or perform a Malaysian identity performing arts, okay? Yeah, performance art, yeah. And
Yeah,
and the rest, I think, will be like more of a either taking issues of what is happening around them, response to issues, or like you can see in Sharon Chin's Tugu Kita participatory performance, and more of a connection, making connections with the community and yes.
Yeah, I mean, that question is always difficult in Southeast Asia, and some of the audience members also noticed how, you know, of course, multi-racial, multi-ethnic, the art scene is in Malaysia, and that's a reflection of society. But it's interesting how artists in the 90s especially are kind of looking for alternatives, you know, rather than finding some truer, more authentic Malaysian identity. There's also this idea of an alternative vision. And so it's equally Malaysian, but it's just a different view. So I think that with Jane popping up, it's our signal.
Well, all I can say is it's been extremely interesting. If you want to say, Professor Abdullah, do you want to have a few last words to say? Because I think we're now a little bit over time, but we probably have time for a few concluding remarks if you'd like to make that, take that opportunity.
Oh, okay. I hope that my people gets published soon, but not this year though, probably next year. So you can all read it later. But there are many questions here though. Like I'm like amazed at the fact that there are many people asking questions, and I hope that maybe if you want to drop a line or two in my email, I will try and entertain them. You know, but yeah.
Right, that would be, we would certainly send you the outstanding questions. And the other thing, just from Asia Art Archive perspective, I was just wondering, and again, Professor Taylor mentioned this before, but just perhaps just say one word about the archives or the sources of a lot of the material that you have. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about that, and then that'll be our last question.
So it is a very difficult research to begin with, because most of the artists do not have or do not, it's the early 1990s, no, but most of them doesn't have you know, a camera at the time, you know, so but I'm lucky enough because and I would like to thank the fact that Five Arts Center has a lot of these documentations, and you know, recently with Facebook and web pages and things like that, and this digitization has, you know, crop up on the internet, and I'm very grateful for the works that Five Arts Center did, and also they even have like a video archive in which that some like the one with Swan Song, Ismail Zain, which I've seen, but I couldn't like show it, you know. And of course, the quality is not as great as today's pixel and things like that. But so I'm just grateful for Five Arts Center for having archives in which helps me out a lot in terms of the materials, the posters and things like that. Because the artists, I contacted the artists, and some of them said that he doesn't even have a copy of the, a copy of the catalog, for example. I'm like, what? So yeah, and yeah, so oh well, but work has to go on. So yeah, I'm very grateful for Fine Art Center and allowing me to use some of the materials in this presentation.
Great. Great. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think that obviously there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of archives to excavate. You've done a huge job. It's a great project, and we thank you very, very much for joining us. And Nora, thank you for your questions and for your support.
Thank you. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
And we will continue. Please come back and we'll continue this conversation. But thank you very much. And thank you all, the audience, for joining us.
Thank you for joining me, us. Thank you from Malaysia. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.